to Jung at Harp. I am Deborah Henson-Conant. I am here with Kathleen Wiley. I'm a composer and a performer, and Kathleen is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, and so we call this Jung at Harp. And today we are going to talk about harmony. What is a harmony in music, in relationships, in life? When do we like disharmony? When do we like dissonance? What are those things? So, Kathleen, why don't we start with you? Can you just talk about what is harmony from your standpoint, and where does it fit in your work?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because harmony is subjective, isn't it? I mean, when I went to look up what the meaning of harmony was, it said that which was pleasant to the ear. And so it's subjective. What harmony is subjective. And in Jungian analysis, we don't aspire so much to reach a state of harmony as we aspire to a state of wholeness, which allows for that which is harmonious and that which is disharmonious, or what we might say that which is congruent and that which is incongruent. And then one of the primary principles of Jungian psychology is the transcendent function, which says when we can consciously hold the tension of the opposites, a uniting third emerges. So for instance, in music or in relationship, there may be an experience, a set of notes that we like and is pleasurable to our ear. But then there's this other thing that isn't pleasurable to our ear, but yet it somehow keeps drawing us back in. And, I've said in our prior conversation, I was reminded of this episode of Andy Griffith from my childhood days. I'm sure you could find the reruns somewhere, where there was this couple in town who were always yelling at each other and throwing things at each other. And the townspeople came to Andy and said, "You've got to do something." And so he went to them and kind of in his sheriff fatherly way said, "You've got to stop this." And so he helped them, and they imposed this kind of artificial niceness at home. And then within a matter of days, they were being hostile towards people on the street. And it just escalated and escalated. And so the townspeople went back to Andy and said, "You've got to do something," So he kind of went back to them and said, "Okay, you can throw things at each other as much as you want." And as soon as they started doing that, when they were out in public, they were nice again. And everything was harmonious in the sense of pleasurable to the townspeople and pleasurable for this couple because that's how they related. So what is harmonious may not always be that which is ideal, or it may not always be that which someone else would judge as desirable, or what psychology might judge as healthy.
Well, it's so funny when you're talking about that, because harmony in music, there is no such thing as not harmony. As it's not about being harmonious, or I mean, it can. I mean, that is a value judgment, but harmony is actually just when there are two notes and they represent or they define. They have a meaning. They have a meaning for each other. They define where the piece is going. And I listened to this a few days ago. I love this piece by Ravel called Valse Noblesse et Sentimentale. And I'm sure I'm not saying it with the right accent, but whatever. I used some accent. And I listened to an orchestral performance of it. And it was, big and rich. And but I was feeling like, wow, this is not having the emotional impact on me that it did as a child when I first fell in love with it, or when I first heard it as a young person. And so I searched for another version of it. And I found a version of it by a pianist. So it was completely different version, same music, not for orchestra, for piano, in a way that you would think would have much less richness. And yet, so it was the same harmony, the same melody, the same piece, but the way the pianist played it and the way that there was a language in it. There was a harmonic language. and at the way that he played made that language clearer. It was as if he was singing, so you could really hear what he was saying, as opposed to Gesundheit, as opposed to the orchestra, which just didn't have the subtleties of that. And he was really leaning. I was trying to play some part of it before. This is nothing like the piece, but there was a part in it where I mean, the parts that I always love in music are the parts that are just like, just like just where I would, as a child, would be just dancing and singing and just jumping on the furniture. But there was a part in the piece, there's a specific part in the piece where it's like la da dee da da da. There's this repeated melody, but the harmony keeps changing and becoming more and more insistent. And then there's just this moment where it hangs in the air, but it never hangs in the air long enough for me. And I just wanted to hang there forever before it resolves. And there was something about the way the pianist played it, that the harmonic relationships. So I don't know how to say that. I don't even know how to play it because I can't play the piece. But there was something in the piece that had that kind of repetition. It was just like, and for me, that is harmony. That is this incredible. And I'm thinking about all this because I'm about to do a class. I have a class in the academy called Hands-on Harmony, and there are many ways to teach harmony. But it's I teach it the way that I see it, which is sort of from the essential up, and about the emotionality of it and the relationships and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking about it. Sorry, I realize I'm talking it to me. Those harmonies are, what music is. That's what, and I know some people hear music as melody, but that harmony that moves, that hangs, that, just creates this whole, it's like a world is created with harmony. And I just feel like I'm talking about my own experience. Like I do know this, that when I'm teaching harmony, and when I'm teaching, for example, this is what's called the dominant chord. So if I'm in the key of C, you'll often hear Beethoven go. Or whatever. So you're going between the tonic and the dominant and the tonic and the dominant. So this, and I won't go deep into it, but the dominant is sort of what defines Western harmony, that relationship of the dominant to the tonic. And what's fascinating to me is that harmony can be enhanced. You can add other notes to it, but it can also be really enhanced. And you can add all these rich, they're called alterations. The function is not changed. It still goes back to this. Its whole purpose in life is to go back to this, but it can be or, which to me is just kind of like not that interesting, versus. Whoops. So I mean, you're a musician, but what are you hearing there? What are you hearing that's different? Or I know that there are people also, I don't know if we can see the chat. I feel like I'm talking about something that's like so deep in me that I don't have words for, even though I teach it. I mean, I can teach you how to do it, but I don't know how to describe that. Like, this is life.
Yeah, so this is what's coming up in my revelry, whether this is exactly what you're saying or not, but this is what's coming up. It's what you're calling the alterations, I'm thinking of as flavors. And I'm feeling as if what you're saying is that the harmony and what you heard the pianist do with this piece is he was using a harmony, chords, or whatever, arpeggios, whatever he was doing in the left hand that gave a different flavor or a different feeling tone or brought out a different nuance of emotion with a particular piece of the melody. And that part of what enlivens you and has since a child, it's the breadth and depth of those different emotional nuances, of those passions, that the harmony, that the different chords or different notes and where they land between one chord or the five chord can give to the flavor of the music.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to say that he was playing exactly the same music. There was nothing
Oh,
different. It was a
uh-huh.
different arrangement. The composer had written, I think the composer first wrote it for piano and then wrote it for orchestra.
Mhm.
So I'm saying, I can see why you'd think that. I kind of said two confusing things. I was talking about enriching the harmony, but what he did was took the harmony that was there and gave it more meaning
Mm.
by where he paused. It was almost like the difference between saying a sentence like this and saying a sentence like this.
So what, yeah. So you're talking about his expression, that
Right,
his own relationship to what he was playing was different than the orchestra you listened to. And
right.
that relationship came through in his fingers, which we know on our instruments that our relationship, our felt sense we are having in the moment we're playing flows through our fingers. It flows
Right.
through the instrument of the voice.
Right. It's almost like, I mean, I know I've heard that humans are meaning making machines. And I keep going back in all our conversations to this one conversation I had when I was probably 17 or 18 on a Greyhound bus. I was talking to the guy, in back of the seat behind me. And I said, well, I'm a composer. And he was like, I'm a philosopher. And so we're like, okay. And he said, hey, answer me one thing. He said, why don't I like modern classical music? And I said, oh, well, probably you just don't understand it. And he was like, whoa, 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 wait a second here. I can understand a sentence. I can understand a mathematical equation. What do you mean I don't understand the music? And that was such a beautiful question that I have literally been thinking about it for my whole life. And this question about harmony and what is it is part of that. Because I think that when I heard this pianist play, he was creating a sense of meaning, of human meaning, similar to what we say in sentences with words. But music is speaking of a different part of experience. When we speak music, we are speaking of a different. We're still trying to describe the human experience, but it's different than when I say I picked up a pencil and I loved feeling the facets of it in my hand, and then I realized it was a tool with which I could write, and it would take my thoughts and put it on the paper. I mean, that, well, there there goes. That's a sort of a poetic way of looking at a pencil. But when I speak even just this chord, which I love that chord, it speaks something for me. Or when I speak this harmony, that speaks happiness to me. Like,
But
well,
I,
I know. And so what am I saying? What are we
well, I
speaking?
think what you're talking about at this moment it is that there are different languages The use of words is really only one language. Music is a language. So, music is a language by which a lot of people, particularly musicians, feel much more comfortable and skilled at expressing their experience through. And there are people, I mean, artists often are much more comfortable with the language of their artistic medium than they are with words. And the reality is that words are a primary way of relating to one another.
Oh.
So, developing the capacity to put words onto our experience is important. What you said to the philosopher is he yet had not found the words to put on his experience of modern classical music.
Oh, oh,
Um,
well,
and I
I
also
also,
want to say, Jung says that when when man discovered their capacity to make meaning, that the human had discovered their place in the scheme of things. So what you said about that that we are meaning making machines, that our capacity to make meaning is part of what defines the human experience.
well, I would just want to go back and say, well, I really want to talk a lot about that, but I want to say that I actually didn't mean that he'd found the words. I meant that he hadn't. Oh, I don't know how to describe this, but let me just say another experience. When I was
Mm-hmm.
in music school, I was studying very atonal music, music that's not even based on the system that our music is based on. And we were going to have a test on which we would listen to 12 different pieces. We were going to have a test on which one was which when we heard it. And when I first listened to them, I was like, they're all the same. How am I going to tell the difference? And then as I studied them and as I made the distinctions, as I began to understand, as I began to break them apart, as I began to hear them, hear the distinctions, not only was it obvious, the different pieces in just even in a small part of it, but I became in love with them. And that experience of learning to fall in love with something that had seemed so alien to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to go back. I want to make sure. So I want to go back to harmony, and I want to go back to the idea of character and expression. And I love how you said there are so many languages, and each
Mm-hmm.
of us is learning, can express in that language. Like I know people when they dance, they're speaking. And when
Mm-hmm.
then when you talked about words, I was like, wow, so it's like words are like money in the sense that they're common currency. At
Yes.
least we think we all understand them. We can all use them to some degree. But then there are all these individual values in life. And I know I'm feeling like we're not talking about harmony at all, but I think we are. I'm going to trust that we are. So for me, harmony is not a judgment, but like is it harmonious or is it not harmonious? Because that is a judgment. But harmony is a language.
Mm-hmm.
It is a set of principles with which one can enrich one's expression. So let's look at that in terms of relationships and life, just for a minute. If harmony in life is a way in which we can enrich our expression and our expression of ourselves, our character, and our expression towards each other, how would that look in life?
Well, I think for a minute I've got to stop and define how we're going to use harmony in this moment. So
Yeah.
that harmony from the Greek harmonia means joint, agreement, and concord. So there's something that harmony means in agreement, in concord, where there's a joining. And again, from the point of view of Jungian psychology and from the experience of the Western psyche, we live very much in a world of dichotomy. And we live in a world, unfortunately, of right and wrong, good or bad, all of those kinds of splitting that we've done. So that somewhere the ability to hold our experiences of those two things that are not joined, that are not in agreement, and to find our own relationship and meaning with both sides can facilitate the internal function that Jung called the transcendent function, where organically our psyche unites something to where there is a third that is a joining of these two parts. In a way, if I'm following what you're saying about music and the part, what you were saying about you could use the tonic or the dominant, or you could go to a suspended chord in terms of giving a harmony to a melody, that in some ways the deciding factor might be the felt sense of meaning that you were having at the moment you put that particular harmony, that chord or that note with the melody, the meaning that it brought up for you in the moment. So maybe part of what we're saying about music and about life is that we can't really talk about harmony and how to have harmony in your life separate from the meaning you make of things that might to someone else appear discordant.
You know, this is really fascinating because when you said that description, can you say that description again? It's something about agreement.
I don't know if I can say it exactly, but we have it taped. I mean,
no. The agreement. I think you were reading a definition.
Oh yeah, that harmony from the Greek word harmonia,
right,
means joint, agreement, and concord.
Okay, so that's really interesting because when the whole idea of harmony in music, here's a tonic. Whoops! Now I'm in a different key. Here's a tonic chord. Here's a dominant chord. The dominant chord wants to go to the tonic. Well, only if we agree. Only if we agree on that. And so I'm just realizing that the understanding or the science of or the art of whatever art of harmony is really about the agreement that we have about how music works.
Yes, and the agreement you have with the people you're playing with at a given moment.
Right.
And the agreement of the direction that the musicians want to move in collectively. And Connie has put in a comment to this effect. And Connie, hello, thank you. She says, to me, harmony is what a person or conductor uses to balance the ups and downs to give meaning or expression to the events in life or the music. So that again, making meaning of the ups and downs is a good way to talk about what, again, may at times appear dissonant, that it goes in different directions, but that the musician and the conductor for the orchestra is the one deciding the direction of the movement. So,
I don't want to get,
or may not be.
The composer decides on the harmony, but the conductor and the symphony can make that more meaningful, because it's almost like the composer's written the words, and then it's almost like the composer is the mind, but the conductor and the musicians are the mouth. So the mouth can either I certainly know from hearing people perform my music that a great performer or someone who feels it in a certain way can give meaning to something that I've written that I wasn't even aware of. And that it's a beautiful revelation to me. So there is this beautiful, and as you were speaking, I was thinking, oh, and we can reharmonize, because you were saying harmony is sort of the color and the meaning that gets added to whatever's happening. So if we think of the melody as what's happening in the world and the harmony, so for example, I love to take a little star. Whoops. Oh, let me get myself. Yeah, that's how I feel today. Not really. Okay. Okay, that's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but I could reharmonize it. I could reharmonize it. It's the same melody, but it's got a different meaning. It might be, it's a more pensive meaning.
Yeah, but again, you're saying something I think that is important, is that harmony, if we're going to use the definition agreement, that something's in agreement or in concord, cannot be separated from the felt experience that the listener is having, or the musician is having, or the speaker in relationship is having, or the recipient of what's being said, that there is something about the harmony that cannot be separated from the felt sense of the moment.
Well, when you go back to that Andy Griffith and relationships, it sounds like when those two people, even if they were arguing, were in harmony on that argument, then there was a holding together of the relationship. And so being in harmony doesn't necessarily mean that, like, I go on dating I'm on dating sites, and whenever I see somebody say no drama, like, I don't want what's my perfect ideal date? No drama. And I'm like, well, forget it, because you're going to get drama with me. So I'm out of that. Where was I going with that? Just that I wouldn't be in harmony with that person.
Yeah.
Because they would
you wouldn't be in agreement. There wouldn't be a concord, because that's just a part of how you express yourself.
Yeah, or that person would, I'm pretty sure that person would think that something was drama that I might not experience as drama. I might experience it as a conversation or whatever. So what Connie is saying, a different impression of the same. So that's really interesting. So so let's go back for a minute. We talked about harmony as being harmonious. We talked about it being, in a sense, an agreement, but not necessarily agreement on a specific thing. Any agreement. We talked about Western harmony being a big agreement, similar to, like, that we agree that money is valuable. That's I've talked about money in two different ways, so forget that. But let's just say, okay, Western harmony is a big agreement. Kind of like as we it's a language. So we have to agree on our language in order to be in harmony with each other when we speak. We have to be in agreement. For example, I'm not going to get into politics, but you have to be in agreement on what the facts are, right? In order to have a conversation with somebody.
Or you have to be in agreement that there is a reality that transcends either one of your understanding of the facts. But again, there has to be an agreement that can hold the two opposites together. So again, when you're playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in the second way that you played it, then that has to be in agreement with your intention of playing it, or with the intention of who you are playing it for.
Right.
So the agreement may be of a larger reality that includes a third that's not yet known.
Can you talk more about that? Because that's right in the center of Jung, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've demonstrated that 2 or 3 times today, and that you've said something, and then I've said something in response based on how I interpreted what you said. And then you said, well, it's more a little like this, that there's a reality beyond what you're expressing in the moment beyond what I'm experiencing of what you're saying in the moment, and then my response to you. And so there is this ongoing harmonic progression between us and our willingness to listen as best we can, to be in touch with what's resonating in our bodies and make meaning of it for a response. So
You
it's
just,
about, we
yeah,
always go back to relationship.
yeah, I mean, you just said something. You said a harmonic progression between us. And when you said that, I suddenly thought about what happens in a harmonic progression of music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the way that we're used to hearing it, it's always going to come back to that place. But like, I mean, that was a progression. I don't know if you could kind of feel the progression, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's more dissonance in resolve, more dissonant and resolve, well, that's consonant, and then more dissonant, going to a new place. And it just made me, I don't know where I'm going here. Well, I do know. I just don't know how to say it. In that every conversation has a harmonic progression in
Yes.
which there is a sense of perfect agreement, and then a sense of maybe dissonance, a sense of
Mm-hmm.
maybe I don't know where we are. Now I know where we've come back. And then, and I have a trust that no matter what happens in this conversation, we're going to end up somewhere that I probably wasn't expecting, but hoping for, even though I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. And that we end up, that's our agreement. We are in harmony. We are in concord with, that's the experience we want to share between us and with our listeners. And that the value of that, that's how we live in relationship to ourselves and other people, in a way that we can cultivate connection. That we have to be able to tolerate the moments of dissonance and not demonize ourselves or another, in order to move forward together. And that whatever the music, whether it's literal music or again the interaction that's being co-created.
Yeah, and we've made an agreement that we are going to go. I mean, it's not explicit, but I think each of us have made that
Mm-hmm.
agreement. We're going to go where this conversation goes.
Right. That's right. And we both trust that we
Right.
have that as for me, it's a life value. And I think it is for you too, that we have a life value, that we trust the process, the creative process, and our own intention with showing up 100%, that something creative and life-giving will emerge.
I'm reading what J.T. McKinney, and I love that
Yes.
he said this. In music theory, we call this functional harmony, the agreed upon notion that consonances and dissonance have intention and direction. And I mean,
Yes.
that's so emotionally beautiful for me. Not
Yeah.
just because it's about music, but when I think about it in terms of relationships, functional relationship, the agreed upon notion that consonances and dissonances have intention and direction in a relationship. My life, the agreed upon notion that the consonances and the dissonances have an intention and a direction, even if I don't know, or I don't think I know where they're going. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's really beautiful. And one of the things I want to say that's a primary tenet of analytical psychology, Jung very much saw, and I see this all the time, that what creates the biggest problem in people's lives is one-sidedness. So when we get one-sided instead of the whole, so, if harmony has a particular narrow one-sided meaning that leaves out the rest, we set ourselves up to have all kinds of distress. And so the making the room for both and the valuing of both, which is what you've again demonstrated today, Deborah, when you've played, is that that again, the time and place for the harmonies, which may be traditional and considered the common ones that most people find pleasurable, may not be what is harmonious in the moment. That what would be deemed dissonant is what's needed to be in agreement. So that there's room for both. And Jung knew this, that within our own psyche, it's like I can say, I really love my husband and, I would never want to hurt him. But the reality, except for the moments I do. But that doesn't mean I'm going to act on that, I mean, we all have those impulses, they're instinctive. And so, we have to make room for both. And when we make room for both, then the third can emerge. We can find our way.
I want to go back here because you said Jung talked about something one-sided. Do you remember exactly what you said? I don't.
One-sidedness is the problem.
Is the problem. So as soon as you said this, I saw a moment in music school where, and I didn't know how to read music before I went to music school when I was like 18 or 19. So I had this kind of wonderful alien experience of coming in and seeing things for the first time. And I had not grown up listening to records either. So I remember I was given something called a Bach chorale to harmonize or to add the harmony to. And all it was a melody line and a bass line. So as you were saying, the one-sidedness, I was like, right, there is no harmony when there's a single note. There can be all kinds of implied harmony, but a single note is a melody. And I'm kind of hoping JT is either going to back me up on that or argue with me on that, because I want to hear what he has to say. But I remember seeing that, and all it was just like there was a single note, and then there was another, there's a bass line and the melody line. The melody line had more notes, the bass note was moving. And I remember saying to my teacher, I was like, where's the music? Like, where's the music? And he said, it's all there. You're going to fill in the harmony, but the music is all there. With those 2 points and how they intersect, just those 2 points imply and leave open all the rest of the harmony in between. And that's what I was seeing when you were speaking about the dissonances and the harmony. Okay, JT's in here with that. That process is called realization. Okay, thank you. It's called realization when you fill in the harmony between the bass and the melody. And now I'm just like, and that's, I think, what happens with a relationship. Even a relationship with ourselves, what we're doing. I can always look at what I'm doing versus the baseline of what my intention is. And how do I realize that? How do I realize all of that? And we can do that.
Yeah, I think we just got to a beautiful way to summarize today. And what we've been talking about is that realization is somewhere that point of intersection between whatever the opposites may be. So in the case of music, it may be the opposites of the bass line and the melody, but that the harmony is that point of realization. And I think it is so true in our own nature. And in fact, Yogananda's spiritual practice tradition is called the Self-Realization Fellowship, because for him, the spiritual work, as he talked about it as self-realization. Jung called it individuation. I think that the various different religious traditions talk about it in different ways, but it is that point of where we find that meaning of self between whatever the opposites are. Maybe it's the opposites of inner and outer. Maybe it's the opposites of my own body and my head.
And when that's realized in the fuller harmony that we express in between them, and and then we're sharing that harmonic progression of a relationship or our life or the music.
That's right.
Wow, thank you. This was like one of those perfect conversations to me where I start out with a question, and because of Kathleen, you, and because of JT and Connie, and that I come away with a richer experience of myself, my life, relationships, music, which is why I'm here. So,
Yes.
wow,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, JT. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you,
Yes.
music. And I look forward to seeing you again next week for the next episode of Jung at Harp. Thank you
Terrific.
so much. Adios,
Bye-bye.
Kathleen. Bye-bye.